I was quite enjoying today's book right up until about the time all those damn hippies came in and ruined everything. Howdy. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insight into the creative process of storytelling. Folks, today we have novelist Quentin Tarantino with us to discuss his novelization, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he also happens to be writer-director Quentin Tarantino, who wrote and directed Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I think he has a lot to say about it. Look, here's all I can tell you. Get this damn book because it's great. Okay. It was a blast to read. It's totally organic. It's fun to read, but it's not what you expect. In the fine tradition of film novelizations, things are a little different here, and they're different in a way that you're going to love. And that's all I'm going to tell you, because I'm going to take this moment to remind you that there is a spoiler warning in here. Like, we will warn you when we get to the spoiler section. So if you have not yet completed the book, that means that you need to know that we are going to be talking about the book and the new stuff in it in that spoiler section. So press pause and finish the book at that point if you don't want to have anything spoiled, because I don't want to have my email inbox spoiled by crazy 3 a.m. Emails from you being angry at me for bringing up these great parts of the book that we have to discuss. Now, if you're one of those people that you're on the fence, you don't know if you're going to read the book. Okay, we talk spoilers, but the book is so rich. It's 400 pages. Don't think that just because you heard a few spoilers in our spoiler section that the whole thing's been spoiled for you. But the book's out. Go get the book. Without a doubt, this was a really fun interview because we were doing it on the day of release of the book, which was an absolute blast. And as you'll hear, Tarantino is very forthcoming about his creative process, and especially about all the different story threads and loose story threads that he ties together. So I know you'll dig this episode. Now, of course, I want to call out today's sponsor, which is Final Draft. And Final Draft has a great Tarantino connection as well, because in 2020, they put Tarantino into the Final Draft Hall of Fame, of course, for his career contributions as a writer and a director, and in honor of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood during the awards season as well. You don't really need a reason to put Tarantino in the Hall of Fame. But what was interesting, and he gave this great speech, which you could Google, just Google Final Draft Awards Tarantino speech. And basically, he called out Walter Hill's writing for one of the first screenplays that Tarantino ever read of Walter Hill's, which is called Hard Times. And this is when Tarantino was kind of discovering on the page what it meant to be a screenwriter before he had written anything of his own. Beyond that, there's plenty of other reasons to take a look at the finaldraft.com website, namely the fact they have just recently released Final Draft 12. New features include track changes, the outline editor, which allows you to turn any outline into a screenplay. It gives you the bare bones from your outline, turns them into slug lines, turns them into scenes, it's just crazy. There's also a focus mode, which eliminates distractions so you could focus on your writing. I'm too scared to try it, but I am going to try it. I know I desperately need it, so I'm going to try it. Final Draft also made enhancements to the beat board, which is my favorite part of Final Draft, because it's like having a big cork board of like your little note cards, but you could also pin pictures to it digitally and music and video. And it's just on the go with you. Like, it's in your laptop or it's on your desktop or whatever. So the beat board is really cool. Here's all you need to know. I am giving you a 30% off discount coupon code for Final Draft. It is QAPOD21. That's the letter Q, the letter A, pod, POD. 21. And that's a heck of a deal, kids. So thanks to Final Draft. And speaking of things to dig, I hope you check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. And if you've never read us before, I hope you test drive us by reading our free issue. And I think it's important to note that we did a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood cover story when the movie came out, and it is packed full of amazing material, well over 10,000 words worth. We interviewed cinematographer Bob Richardson. We interviewed music supervisor Mary Ramos. We interviewed editor Fred Raskin, the guy who took a 2-hour and 41-minute movie and made it feel like 5 minutes, along with Mr. Tarantino in the editing room, of course. And we interviewed Tarantino himself, and we cut it up into 2 different pieces at the time because it was coming out right when the movie came out. So one is spoiler free, which is focusing on his creative habits of writing the movie. And the other one is spoiler centric. What's interesting is our spoiler centric session ended right at the time when we were going to talk about the third act of the movie. And we did that on purpose because we wanted to keep those spoilers intact. And the fun thing about today's interview as well is I start off our spoiler section talking about the third act of the movie and what went into that, which was a really fun way to start off. So look, there are a lot of things to read on Backstory. When you subscribe, you get access to our archive, and our archive goes back to about issue 28. So we're still adding new old issues to it. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page where the Zoomcasts of these things go support my passion project. So thanks for considering. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into my interview with writer-director Quentin Tarantino, who is now novelist Quentin Tarantino, as we discuss his novelization for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. All right, Quentin, welcome. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
This is the first in-person interview I have done since the pandemic.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm glad I got you out of the bedroom.
You did. Fully vaccinated.
Or whatever, wherever you do it.
Ready to go here. And so, look, I think we're just going to start on a general note.
Okay.
The history of film novelizations, they've been around since the silent film era.
Yeah.
King Kong had one.
King Kong was like, I think, one of the earliest ones.
Yeah. But there were silents that did it too.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, tell me, what was your earliest memory of reading a film novelization? Which one was it?
Oh, I actually remember the first one I ever got, and it was terrific. I've read it quite a few times over the years. Was Thomas Rickman's novelization for WW and the Dixie Dance Kings.
Okay.
And the book was absolutely terrific. When I saw the movie, I didn't really care for the movie at all. I thought it was very arbitrary compared to how specific the book was. And then, like, years later, when Rickman won the Oscar for Coal Miner's Daughter, he was giving an interview. And he was saying, well, like, for instance, the reason that I did the novelization for WW and the Dixie Dance Kings is they changed it so much in the movie that I wrote the novelization so at least one person would know what I originally intended. And I go, hey, I'm that one person. I'm the one that read it, and I got exactly what you meant by that. I am that one person.
I mean, these were really big, especially they got a resurgence in the 70s, and it was in the pre-VHS days because unless you had your own screening room, unless you had 16 millimeters, you couldn't take the movie home.
No,
you could watch it on ABC Sunday Night Movie, but you couldn't take it
and then
home.
it was usually ruined, all right? Because
Right.
if it was R-rated, or like by the time like French Connection comes to ABC, you're like, oh, it's ruined. You can never see it again. But back in the days where you, at least as a kid, I picked up most of my books either in Kmart or the 7-Eleven. And it was like the paperback spinner rack next to the comic book spinner rack. And they were usually filled with horror novels and crime novels and romances and movie novelizations.
I brought you some gifts. We have a gift bag, so you don't lose them. It says you are incredibly awesome. It was from a kid's birthday party. And that's where we're going to get to the first gift. I'm going to show you the way that I first experienced movie novelizations.
Okay.
It was in the pre-VHS days, obviously. So what better way to take it home than an actual book, but something called a photo novel. So for photo novels, those were basically pictures from the movie. And I'm giving you this gift that you're opening now. And there is your very pristine.
Yes. I remember this in the store. I never bought the photo novels, but I remember this one especially, frankly.
Well, now you have it. You can open it up.
I have it. Absolutely.
It's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And just for the listeners at home.
The Phil Kaufman version.
That's right. And for the listeners at home, what they do in these is they take pictures from the movie and then they put dialogue over them like comic books.
Yeah.
And so it was especially popular with kids.
Yeah.
And so, this is a pristine mint copy.
Oh, what? This is absolutely a pristine mint copy.
The only thing missing from it, I'm sad to report because I thumbed through the end of it, is the man dog at the end of the movie.
It doesn't have the man dog. Oh, wow.
No.
But it has Kevin McCarthy on the cover. All right, it has his cameo on the cover of it.
And if you flip to the last page, you'll see Sutherland.
Oh. This is actually really cleverly put together.
It is.
This is really well art directed.
It's beautiful, and I absolutely love it. But it brings me to something, and we're going to jump around a bit. We're going to stay spoiler free for a little while. Yeah. But there's one thing that I don't consider a spoiler from your book, but my jaw just dropped when I was reading it. Page 17, an aside to the reader, referring to the time Invasion of the Body Snatchers producer Walter Wagner shot Jennings Lang in the groin for fucking his wife, Joan Bennett, typo. Quote, if anybody deserves to get their balls shot off, it's that prick's Jennings Lang. and your book is just filled with these incredible stories that are rumors that some, I would assume, are maybe invented, or what's the reality of that one?
Anything like that is real. I mean, even I might be talking, some of them I'm talking about rumors, like, for instance, I never worked with Jack Lord, so I don't know if he was a jerk. But from everybody I've heard from many actors of that time that they had reputations. And so if the reputation was that way, then I mentioned it without necessarily firsthand experience. But any like Hollywood history thing that I'm bringing up, unless it's like connected to Rick, which is usually I'm making it up, no, that's all fairly factual.
I mean, it was a great part of the book because they were talking about Jennings Lang at Universal, and Rick was blaming him for ruining his career, for signing the contract with Universal and then not doing anything with him. Yeah. And it's one of the things that I love the most about the book is that there's a triumph in, there's an impetus in a movie that you have to keep your narrative going. I mean, sorry, you don't have to, okay, but like most people do, and you certainly do.
It's a movie.
It's a movie. But in a book, you can meander a little, and you get into these backroom conversations that are fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
And you're taking just all this film history, just even when you were coming up with that, how did you in your mind do the math of, I'm going to mention Jennings Lang, I'm going to mention that incident? Like, I just want to go inside your mind on stuff like that.
Well, it's not too different than like if I was an expert on World War II and I'm like writing a bunch of guys on a mission story that is vaguely similar to maybe 3 or 4 different missions that happened in real life. But then, you would make references to the war. You would make references to the things that you know about. And pepper it gives you an expert quality and makes the piece seem more even more learned than just following your storyline or your imaginary characters. And so, I'm just filled with all this stuff, but this is the world that these characters live in. I mean, like Rick knows about Jennings Lang getting shot in the balls. I mean, everybody did back then.
Right. I love it. Like, so look, we talked about it for a second when I was setting up my equipment, and there were comic book adaptations, and you even mentioned adaptations that had 45 records to play along as well, which were fun. Uh-huh. And there's something that's been a trend lately, and it's graphic novels based on scripts. So you did one for Django with an early version of your script. Right. But, there's wild stuff. There's William Gibson's Alien 3 script as a graphic novel recently. Dan O'Bannon's first Alien script. George Lucas did the first draft of Star Wars as The Star Wars. Rod Serling's Very Different Planet of the Apes script was a novelization. They did a novelization of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, from the book, not the film.
Somebody asked me, have they ever been a novel that they did a movie and then they did a novelization of the movie? I go, yeah. Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula is a novelization based on James V. Hart's script, which is based on Bram Stoker's Dracula.
There you go. Little math there.
There used to be a joke about Frank Herbert would one day walk into a bookstore and he would see Alan Dean Foster's Dune. Based on the novel by Frank Herbert.
I wonder what you would think of that. Well, so look, I was there, damn it. I was in the room at the Cinematheque at the Kill Bill Volume 1 screening. And you were talking about this idea that you love the animation so much in Kill Bill that you were considering at the time, and I know that it's on the way back burner, doing a Vega Brothers film in an animated style since the actors have aged, but you could use the voices of Vincent and Vic in the movie. And I'm curious, because I know that that's floated to your back burner, have you ever considered something like that in comic book form, in graphic novel form?
No, I think that time has kind of passed on for my interest on that. I think that was probably a first 20 years thing. But different ideas that I don't think I want to spend 2 years of my life making a movie out of, I could do a few different ways now.
Well, one of the ones we talked about in the past, when you were writing Inglourious Bastards, you became absorbed and in love with the African-American troops that were dropped behind enemy lines to scare the Germans. And you had this concept listed as Killer Crow as an idea. And you did so much research on it. You had it all worked out. And I'm curious, would you ever consider something like that as either a graphic novel or a novelization?
It could work. It would just be, since I have never made a movie, it would just be a novel.
Well, but it's in the Inglorious universe, right?
And nevertheless, it's still a novel. It's not a novelization of the script. I could do that. I could do that as a book. I could do that as a script. Maybe let somebody else do it. I could do that as, or I could do it as a graphic novel. I could actually see it actually working out pretty good as a graphic novel, to tell you the truth.
I could too. I hope you do. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Look, we've known each other a long time. We've interviewed many years, but the biggest change in your life we started talking about for Once Upon a Time. And it's you're a family man now.
Yeah,
you're all proper.
Yeah.
So it was just beautiful. The opening of the book, it says this book is dedicated to Daniela and Leo, and thanks for creating a happy home from which to write in. So tell us, how has your writing changed as family men, especially with the birth of your son, because that is new, and a lot of working writers, they find it to be a juggling act between I want to be a good dad, but I still have a deadline of writing.
No, it's I normally have a deadline, so I don't have to deal with something like that. But no, it was great. I mean, the second half of the book I wrote during the whole COVID thing, and COVID hit me. We were in Israel at the time. COVID hit me in kind of an interesting way because, that was the year that I was going to be at home anyway.
Right.
The first year of my son's life is going to, hang out with him and hang out with my wife as we, as she takes care of him. So that also coincided with me finishing up this book. Well, it ended up being perfect. I mean, my wife, she's the one who takes care of him on his first year, all the time. And then, so I'm able to go into my office and write for a while, and then hey, Quentin, he's pointing at something and he means it, and so I go out and then I play with him for a while, or we watch TV, or I take him for a run around the park or something. I'm writing, hey, Quentin, we're going to give him a bath. Okay, so I'll come up and join you for that. So it was just ended up being perfect. I'm there. I'm present. I'm out there doing my work, but I'm right there. I'm right there with him to play, and it's great.
That's awesome. When did you get the idea to do this novelization? And I'm hesitant to call it a novelization because I've seen in different places that you've once or twice referred to it as an original novel that the movie was based on, therefore making the movie an adaptation.
That's more conjecture. Okay?
I know, so you set the record straight, Maestro.
It's more conjecture, all right. I do think it plays as if the book was written first, and then I bought the book and then had to turn it into a movie, and then the movie I turned it into is the movie you've seen.
That's right. Did you ever consider using a pseudonym on the book?
No.
Like Rupert Vega, or whatever.
No, but the thing is, but I think it's a novelization proper. You're using your memory from the movie. I'm assuming that most people. I'm assuming, at least for the first 2 years, 97% of everybody who will have read it saw the movie.
Yeah,
and there's a whole long history of screenwriters doing novelizations to their movies.
So you do consider it a novelization, though?
I do consider it a
novelization.
novelization.
Good. Just making sure. As we discussed before, you write by hand, and then you type it out on your Smith Corona P5.
Yeah.
And you go page by page on that, because it only goes page by page, even though it has an electronic component.
Yeah.
This is a 400-page manuscript. Did you use that same process?
In this, this was the first thing I haven't done with the Smith Corona. All right, I wrote it all by hand, and then I typed it up on Pages. On my iPad, but with like a really cool old-fashioned keyboard.
Nice.
Like old-timey that my wife got me, old-timey
awesome.
typewriter keyboard. And then I sent it to a typist that put it together for me.
To put it together. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you were using Pages.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. That's high tech for you.
Yes,
that's a big deal, sir.
It's the first time I did it. Yeah.
All right. Did you like it?
Yeah. No, it was fun. It was better than the Smith Corona for what I was doing. Smith Corona actually works pretty good for screenplays.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this was better for a novel.
Did you have one of those Bluetooth keyboards that you could hit the return on?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. That's exactly what I had. Yeah, you do the return. And it looks like it's something like William Faulkner would be using.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as we've discussed, you typically don't outline. But what's interesting here is this is technically an adaptation. So officially for your producing record, your second produced adaptation with Jackie Brown being your first from Rum Punch, Elmore Leonard. And I'm curious, Did you outline in any way, shape, or form, knowing that the film was so fluid in your head, when you sat down to just get a sense, not beat by beat, but maybe even a roadmap of where you were going to go with the book?
I had the script right next to me, and I knew there was like special sections I wanted to add to it. So yeah, I pretty much knew what the first 4 chapters were going to be. So I wrote the first 4 chapters, and then from that point on, it kind of became a bit of a juggling process of like, oh, well, where does the reader want to be now? Because I am kind of sort of splitting up the novel between Rick chapters and Cliff chapters, and then every couple of times there's a Sharon chapter, and then there's a Manson chapter. And so I'm just kind of like juggling it. Okay, now who do we want to be with now? Who would I want to be now? Do I want to jump into the future, or do I want to jump in the past?
I mean, it's fascinating because you've told me that you do that with your screenplays as well, in which when you're writing a new one, you'll have one of your old ones by you. So as you see the pages stack up, you have a sense of how much further you have to go. It's very analog.
Yeah, well, that's very different, though, because in that case, I'm just kind of reminding myself the page count, and because you're making a movie, so you only have so much of a page count. Here, I'm actually, I want more pages to make it legit.
Was there ever going to be a version that was longer than 400 pages?
No.
Okay.
This is pretty long.
Well, so, on page 7 of the original screenplay, before we did our interview, you had me read the original screenplay.
Right, yeah.
It was in a safe. I saw them unlock it. It's not a myth.
Yeah.
This was really in a safe. On page 7, you wrote this. From time to time, a novelistic narrator will come on the soundtrack to clue the audience into things they may not know, like this tidbit, for instance. That's a big fucking lie. Rick got his driver's license taken away for too many drunk driving tickets. Cliff drives him everywhere now. So it was the introduction of using a narrator.
Yeah.
As everybody knows, point of view is very important in your work. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because you flip around even within a chapter dedicated to one of your characters between sometimes being an omniscient third-person point of view or in the mind of Rick or even in the scene with Marvin, in Marvin's mind as well. Kind of taking us through like, oh, this schmuck, this poor kid. You know what I mean? Like he just doesn't get it. What kind of rules did you give yourself, if any, or was it more like you wanted to just let it go where it took you?
Well, I wanted it to go where it took me because I think, because there is a novelistic narrator, all right, and he is telling the story, and even though he may sound remarkably like me, he's not me. He's a novelistic narrator, but part of the thing of a novelistic narrator is they'll tell you things from their point of view, but they have privy to what the characters are thinking.
Right.
So even though it's the novelistic narrator telling it to you, when they say it in the patina of the character, you know that they're speaking for them. The one thing that I did, though, was, okay, so the novelistic narrator definitely knows what happens in the past, and he knows what happens in the present, and he has a clue about a lot of things that happen in the future. So then I had to ask myself, well, how much does he know in the future? Does he know what's going on in 2020? Does he know that? Well, no. Then the guy would be fucking 95 years old. All right, so I don't want to be that old. So I had to come up with a pretext for it all. And so the novelistic narrator can talk about what happens in the future, but his knowledge only extends to 1999.
Interesting. Okay, 1999. That's an important number that we will come back to, damn it. I have a note about that. We'll get to that in the spoiler section. But, look, my little rant here, novelizations, almost all of them sometimes go away from the movie. And sometimes it's because it's an early draft of the script and the writer just feels empowered. Yeah. They want to live longer with a character, live longer with a setup or a scene. My favorite example, I was on vacation when Total Recall came out in 1990. I couldn't read it, but I wanted to read the book. I love Philip K. Dick. And Piers Anthony, the sci-fi writer, took him upon itself to explain something missing from the movie, which is, why is the oxygen machine on Mars? Why does it have a handprint in the middle that humans are supposed to use? And he put in this device that an intelligent alien organization put it there. It's mankind's final test. Either we put our hands in and share the commodity of oxygen, or if we're selfish and we don't, after a certain amount of time, after you walk in the room and it's activated, mankind will be obliterated, which is something that's not really in the movie.
Yeah.
And I've always loved it. We even interviewed Piers Anthony, the writer, about it in Backstory Magazine.
Oh, wow.
I was so obsessed with it. I'm curious, what's something like that for you? From a novelization, something that is absolutely not in the movie that you might know or love, but that you absolutely adore from a novelization that invented it.
it isn't something where they solve a story problem, but one of my probably, as time has gone on, I think my favorite movie novelization, and my favorite movie novelizer is a guy named John Minahan. And he did the American Graffiti. Actually, when American Graffiti came out, they just actually published George Lucas's script.
Right.
But then when More American Graffiti came out, they hired John Minahan to do the complete American Graffiti. So that's a novelization of both movies put together, like one big book. But he also did the Sorcerer novelization. He did the Jeremy novelization. He did the Eyewitness novelization. But my favorite novel of his, and it's actually probably one of my favorite novels, is he did James Bridges' the novelization for the James Bridges movie September 30, 1955, the one with Richard Thomas, dealing with James Dean's death. Back when it was called by its original title, 9/30/55. Now the thing is, I read that book when it came out in 77 because the movie was held back until like 79 when it came out. I read it when it first came out and was completely enraptured with the book. I thought it was fantastic. Then later, Universal released it as the lower half of a double feature with the movie Running, the Michael Douglas movie. And so finally, after 2 years, I'm finally going to get a chance to see September 30, 1955. And I go running to the Marina 3 to go see it in the lower half of Running. And only to my chagrin and shock and irritatedness that the movie only deals with the last third of the novel. Because the movie pretty much just takes place the day after James Dean died. Right. As a matter of fact, when it showed on television, NBC changed the title to 24 Hours of the Rebel, which is actually a pretty good title. John Minahan's novel takes place 2 years before that night. And it follows the character Jimmy J, like from the moment that he enters Arkansas State or Arkansas U, or wherever he's going to school at. And it tells it tells his whole 2 years leading up to that night. And the character of the kooky character of Billie Jean Adams is this magnificent character. I mean, it's just a wonderful book. Now, if you watch the movie, which again, it's a very autobiographical movie where the lead character is obviously supposed to be James Bridges when he was a young man. The book is so specific that I thought before I started looking up and realized that John Minahan had written other novelizations, that they must have found a book that was as autobiographical as James Bridges' screenplay was, and just asked them to like maybe turn it into this thing. But no, that was just John Minahan's way.
That's awesome.
It's all told in the first person, Jimmy J's first person narrative. Now it's interesting. The movie, you can tell that the movie is a little indebted to somewhat to Summer of 42, but that's not in the book. However, when I read the book, I hadn't read Walker Percy's The Moviegoer. And then like many years after I read 9/30/55, I read Walker Percy's The Moviegoer. And you can see that John Minahan is very influenced by Walker Percy's The Moviegoer when he wrote the book. I still like 9/30/55 much better than The Moviegoer.
I mean, look, I had a similar experience because I read Total Recall, the book first, because I was on vacation. When I finally saw the movie, I was shocked that scene wasn't in the movie because it seems like it's the most important scene in the movie. Obviously, Arthur C. Clarke is the other famous example with 2001 because he was collaborating with Kubrick for years. It was based on a short story of his, The Sentinel, and then he turned it into a novel that actually filled in some of the blanks for some of the audiences that wanted a little more finality, closure, whatever you want to call it. So that's the other famous novelization.
There's even other...
and there's a graphic novel of it, too. The big, huge graphic novel that came out around then, too, of 2001.
Oh, yeah, and then there's the Jack Kirby 2001 that came out.
That's what I meant.
But there's even like a whole little subgenre of novelists who wrote screenplays and then turned their screenplays into novels. So, like Love Story was a novelization. They Eric Siegel wrote the book, and then they say, "Why don't you write the novelization?" He did, and when he turned it in, they go, "Hey, this is pretty good. We could come out with this as a book," and then it became like the phenomenon book of the time. Elmer Leonard's Mr. Majestic was a screenplay that he later turned into after they did the movie. He wrote a book version. Donald Westlake's Cops and Robbers was a screenplay that he turned into a book. Alistair MacLean's Where Eagles Dare was a screenplay that he turned into a book.
I love that screenplay. Look, I just wanted to ask you this because I was at the Final Draft Awards during the award season.
The whole Walter Hill thing,
and the Sklar brothers were there. They did a great set to open it up with, with their comedy, and then Walter Hill was there in the audience. And you talked about how you'd read a couple screenplays, but it wasn't until you read Walter Hill's screenplay for Hard Times that something clicked with you. Yeah. What clicked with you? What was in that script that was special to you?
It was the first script where I didn't feel that I was reading like a blueprint for what they hoped would be made. I felt Walter Hill's writing voice. He was writing to me. He was writing to the reader. He wasn't writing to a production manager. He wasn't writing for the production designer. He wasn't writing for executives to say yes or no to a movie. It didn't have a blueprint. You could read it. It was entertaining. His prose style was very vivid, and it was funny, and it made little jokes, and it was written. It was a piece of writing. I could read it.
How hard was it for you to get a screenplay back then?
Oh, it was. If ever I got one, it just was by happenstance. It was by happenstance. I mean, the only the three screenplays that I had for like a long time, like the only three screenplays I had was Norman Wexler's screenplay for Drum. And Walter Hill's Hard Times, and then I had Melissa's original script for Apocalypse Now. Everybody seemed to have that one, and I had Walter Newman or Walter Bernstein's screenplay for Blood Brothers.
Wow. That's a good way to start.
Those were actually pretty good. They were really good screenplays.
Yeah, that's a pretty good start, man. Well, so here we are at gift number 2.
Okay.
As another congratulations on the publication of your first novel. Right. Here we go. This is mint condition. I was so terrified it wasn't going to arrive in time, but it did. You could rip that open. I wrapped it myself, and I did a stand-up job. I am so curious to know if you have this in your collection or not.
I don't. Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't even know they did a novelization for Hard Times.
I knew there was a chance. So we were just talking about it. You could open it up. You could thumb through it. There's beautiful blue pages,
Oh, man.
I figured you would love this. And Hard Times is a movie that you don't think that they would do a novelization of. Yeah. Well,
right? There's so many weird movies that like you can't believe there's novelizations. I mean, there's a novelization to Meatballs. Right. I mean, I'm dying to read the novelization to Meatballs. Like, what the F can they do? But this is fantastic.
Yeah, look at the cover. Like it mentions Walter Hill's screenplay.
Yeah,
he had nothing to do with writing it. Okay, good. I was terrified you were gonna have 5 of them at home.
Oh no, I don't. No, I'm not. No, this is
you have something to read on the plane.
This is a real surprise because I did not, and I'm pretty familiar with nowadays for the last 2 years. I'm pretty familiar with what they did novelizations to and what they didn't. This is really, really.
It took me a couple days until I realized that might be your gap, and it is. I can't wait to hear what you think of it. So look, you're not even done. There's a hardcover coming out in the fall. Is there new material in the hardcover that's not?
Yeah, there's going to be new material. It's almost like a DVD with a big bunch of supplementary sections.
Are there going to be new story elements? Or
no, I'm not going to add. No, the book is the book. So I wasn't going to. I thought about that, but that's cheesy. I don't want to add to the book. But there'll be more photos and all of Rick's posters. And the Bounty Law board games and lunch boxes, all that stuff will be in there. The Mad Magazine spoof
cover,
of Lousy Law, but the whole
section,
the whole parody, will be in there. And then there's also going to be one of a copy of one of in the back Rick's scripts for Bounty Law.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so a whole script of a
Bounty Law screenplay.
A whole screenplay, a whole television screenplay of a Bounty Law will be in the back with a couple of Rick notes in it.
Well, here's the weird thing: the novelist Quentin Tarantino has talked about possibly doing his own Bounty Law television show.
Well, I've got about 5 or 6 episodes written. All right.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
So is that still in the books? Is that still a possibility?
I'm going to do a few other things, and if I'm going to go back to this story yet a fourth time, that will be the thing that I can do.
Well, but there's another thing that you told me about when we first did our interview, and you told me to keep a hat on it for a while, but it's obviously okay now. You wrote a play version of this as well. What's going to happen with the play?
Well, it's like that will probably be the next like dramatic thing that I do. I finished the book. I'm working on a cinema book right now.
Right.
And when I finish the cinema book, the plan, we'll see what happens, but the plan was to possibly go forward with the play.
Well, look, earlier I said sometimes authors, when they do these novelizations, they fall in love with something and they get carried away with it. This Tarantino guy, whoever he is, that did the novelization here, wrote some beautiful Lancer fan fiction. And so my question to you is...
I own the rights. It's not fan fiction.
I know you own the rights. So the question is, like, you wrote so lovingly about it. Would a Bounty Law TV version be a serious Western series? Or would it have elements that are in front of the camera and behind the camera?
Oh, no. It would be exactly like a show from 1958 or 59. It would, and it would be black and white, and it would be a half hour long.
Okay.
So it would be very much in the vein of Wanted Dead or Alive or a Rifleman. It would be very done from that time period.
Good to know. All right. So anybody listening to this who has not yet ordered Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the novel by Quentin Tarantino, go do that now. Mm-hmm. You could also press pause right now if you want to stay away from spoilers, but we're going to ease into it with film spoilers first. So if you've seen the movie.
Yeah. But one of the things, though, is funny, though, because I actually imagine that when I send Robert Rodriguez Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think he's going to read the book and go, well, what's going on with Lancer? If you don't want to do it, I'll do it. Because I actually could see that would be a great Robert Rodriguez movie.
That would be good. I'd watch it. I'd watch the hell out of it. But so, okay, we're going to get into the spoilers now. We're going to start the movie. So look, I went crazy in the Backstory Magazine edition for the movie that we did, where we gave you guys the cover. We had DP Robert Richardson in it for his own piece, editor Fred Raskin, music supervisor Mary Ramos. We did two big stories with you, a non-spoiler story about your craft, and then a spoiler story about the movie. Mm-hmm. But we were doing our interview on opening day in your screening room, and you were like, look, we're going to come back to this, but I don't want to talk about the end of the movie. And, I'm a completist. So I want to talk for a moment about the end of the movie because it fills into the end of the book. Yeah. The question really is, at what point did you realize there was going to be an Inglourious Bastards element in which basically Rick is going to save the day and kill the hippie scum, and we're going to get this beautiful fantasy ending where Sharon Tate lives?
Well, that was probably the first idea I came with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was like everything else came from that.
And so once you realized that,
I had the idea of this badass killer stuntman,
right?
And then it was, and then there was the actor he worked for, and that would be why the badass stunt guy could be at the house that's next to Sharon Tate. But it was the idea that like this guy was just this, real genuine killer badass, and then like those hippies come bursting on him, and things go different.
Just a little. It's interesting because one of the elements in the film that I absolutely loved that people pick up on, and it is on Boost in the book, is Rick hates hippies.
Yeah.
But the reason why Rick hates hippies isn't so much political as it's an intimidation by the younger new generation of actors that he knows he's not a part of. Mm-hmm. And for all the chapters you get into Rick's head in the book, it's there, it's present all the time. Mm-hmm. So the payoff in the movie, first of just Rick walking out with a margarita blender yelling at them, keep your car noise down, get off my block. And then, obviously, using a flamethrower. It was a beautiful payoff. Talk about edging that in, because I absolutely loved it.
Well, it's the idea that the leading men that he was in the same boat with, like the George Maharises, the Ty Hardens, the Tab Hunters, they were the leading men, and that's it been that way for the last 10 years. And then all of a sudden they weren't. And now all of a sudden it's Michael Sarrazin. And now all of a sudden it's Peter Fonda. And now all of a sudden it's Christopher Tabori or somebody. And these, long-haired, what he would consider girly men.
Right.
They're not, they're not masculine. What's going on?
You had a great line for it in the script that I was surprised that you cut, that you put in the book. And if you would, Meister, would you read it to us? Because Marvin Schwartz basically lays it all out. It was originally in the beginning of the script, but it comes in the end of the book where there's kind of the final push. And if you want to just read this paragraph that I marked from your book starting there, I just absolutely love your description.
This is Marvin talking. Well, when you weren't looking, the culture changed. You got to be somebody's hippie son to star in movies nowadays. Peter Fonda, Michael Douglas, Don Siegel's kid Christopher Tabori, Arlo fucking Guthrie, shaggy-haired androgynous types. Those are the leading men of today.
But then he goes into the hair on the next page as you keep reading. And I love
Marvin pauses for effect and says, "You still wear a fucking pompadour. Fucking Elvis don't wear a pompadour no more. Ricky fucking Nelson don't wear a goddamn pompadour no more. Eddie fucking Kooky Burns is doing TV commercials for fucking Hairspray saying the wet head is dead, long live the dry look. Fucking kooky. But not you, Rick. You're sticking with the fucking pompadour."
I mean, it's just amazing, and it's a great encapsulation of it all, about how Rick just has it in for these damn hippies.
But there's also an interesting part in the book where Sam Wanamaker wants to kind of turn him into like a hippie Western bad guy,
right?
And like first Rick is like, "You want me to look like a damn hippie?" It's like, oh my god. And so they give him long hair, and they give him a Zapata mustache, and they put a fringe jacket on him whatever. And like, he doesn't like the idea, but he's not going to rock the boat. And like, when the makeup girl and the wardrobe girl and Sam Wanamaker are looking at it, he's not convinced. But he's not, like I said, he's not going to rock the boat. But after he's like in the costume for a little bit, and he's walking down the Western set that's deserted during lunch, and he starts looking at himself reflected in a mirror, surrounded by all this old Western accoutrement. He kind of now he's, it's Rick's way to be defensive about any criticism about him. And this is similar to what Marvin had talked to him about the day before. But now, distanced a little bit from defensiveness, he kind of sees what Marvin's talking about. Because he's been wearing the pompadour so long, the pompadour somehow became him.
Right.
And so he never saw it. He can't even imagine himself like that. In fact, well, what? You're hiring Rick Dalton to be the bad guy. Well, you want him to look like Rick Dalton, right? I mean, Jesus Christ, I have to read the TV guide to even know it's me. All right, I look like some damn hippie. But when he's looking at his reflection in the window, he sees a different actor that he could be.
That's right.
And it's like, oh, wow, well, this guy doesn't look like an Eisenhower relic. Get rid of the pompadour, and this guy kind of looks like a withered actor. I mean, this guy could be in a Sam Peckinpah movie.
Yeah, and it's a great chapter. It's your chapter, Natural Born Edmund.
Yeah.
And Sam is talking about him. He wants to be a rattlesnake on a motorcycle.
Yeah, right, yeah. It's a spirit animal.
It's a spirit animal, which is fantastic. But, something that's interesting that I noticed from script to screen was the tone of the home invasion. In your early draft of the screenplay, it actually was not as cartoony or comedic. And it kind of changed, with the cigarette and with Cliff saying, "Now I know you." And it changed into a cartoony element that made it even more digestible. Because there was so much tension leading up to it. What inspired that change? Because it's not often that you see much of a change that drastic from script to screen. The violence is still there. The elements that happen still happen, but it made it so much more digestible, and the audience absolutely went crazy for it.
Yeah, they. I think it was always going to tap into something as far as audience gratification, that these like horrible killers are getting thwarted by these people. But I don't know. I mean, literally, it was just something that came up. Well, we came up with the idea of I came up with the idea of the acid lace cigarette, and Brad just loved that idea, and then he just literally played it to a fare-thee well, and it just had the benefit, especially for a climax of the movie. It had the benefit of just making it even more enjoyable. It was just like you're laughing even beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the funniest line because I had seen the movie and then read the screenplay that was just killing me. It's not in your book. You know, Sadie's bursting through the glass window.
Yeah.
Her face is bloodied. But Rick's in a pool with headphones on. He has no idea what's happening in the house.
Yeah.
She comes through the window in the pool, and the first thing Rick says, "Oh my God, are you okay?"
Yeah, right.
and I could just see him like literally leaning forward, being like, "Oh my God, Manson family person, are you okay?"
Yeah, right. He doesn't know what's going on.
It's so funny, and I understand why it was cut, but I just wanted to point it out because it would have gone over like gangbusters. But you know, one of the things people have always wondered is what's the aftermath of that night, and what's it do for this failing actor? And if you would, Maestro, you spelled it out in the book.
Okay.
If you just read that paragraph right there that I marked.
Okay. The next day, Rick's adventures hit the news, and it became the talk of the town. It went from local news to the network evening news, and finally the world. Something about Jake Cahill killing 3 long-haired hippie bad guys with his flamethrower from the 14 Fists of McCluskey just seized the imagination. So pretty soon, the whole ghastly night of violence became heavy with symbolic weight, turning Rick, the former TV cowboy, into a folkloric hero of Nixon's silent majority.
I was sad to hear he went the Nixon silent majority route, but it makes sense with the anti-hippieism.
Yeah.
And so, you know, people could have expected you could have done chapter after chapter about the rest of Rick's life. But you just boiled it down kind of there. And you let us know that he had this future. Was there ever a point at which you were going to explore more about that? Because it would be so tempting. Okay. I'm glad you didn't, by the way.
Yeah, not in this. I mean, look, there's yet another.
Here we go.
There's yet another thing I could do. I've written most of it. I just have the last few years. But I wrote just for the fun of it and to get it out of my system because I wanted to know everything that happened to Rick. I wrote the Films of Rick Dalton book.
Okay.
And
I love it.
Yeah, it's written by it's written by me, Quentin. All right. As if Rick is real, and like, you know, they have like the films of Charles Bronson, the films of Anthony Quinn. Well, it's done like that
with criticism in there as well.
Yeah, with
synopsis.
With synopsis and then like some critical quotes from the time, and it goes through, and the book goes through every one of Rick's movies that he did, leading to the end of his career in 1988, I believe, and to every one of his episodic television shows, and it's completely and thoroughly researched. Some of the episodes of some of the shows are made up, and some of the episodes are made up, but the majority of the episodes are actually real episodes.
Wow.
All right, but like, you know, Rick didn't live, so he wasn't in them. But like when you say, "Oh, okay, I guess he's the Larry Hagman character. Oh, I guess he's the Monty Markham character."
That's fascinating. I hope you do publish that one day.
It's all written. Well, I will tell you one thing that did happen to Rick that was actually pretty cool. Was at the start of the 80s. And you know, and there's also some like famous movies that like for instance, he plays the Andrew Prine character in Grizzly.
Okay.
It was a big hit for him. And then he but one of the things that happens is Cliff Booth in like 79 or 80 writes a vigilante exploitation movie for Rick. Rick reads it and thinks that like, oh, we can do this better. So Rick rewrites it, and then the two of them are going to produce it, and then they get the money to produce the movie, and it's a vigilante movie called The Fireman, where it's like a lead character was like in the Vietnam War, very similar to the Exterminator. The character was in the Vietnam War. He became a cop, and then he started seeing this whole group of bad apple cops that are killing these guys and just completely corrupt.
Yeah.
And they end up killing his partner, played by a very young Sam Jackson. And so then Rick targets these bad cops, and he gets dressed up as the fireman. He has his flamethrower, and he goes and he burns them all down. And so like Rick ends up directing the movie. Rick and Cliff produce it.
I love it.
And Cliff directs the action scenes. And it stars Rick and Jim Brown. Ralph Meeker's in it,
right?
And other people are. I think Jane Kennedy's in it. Linda Day George is in it. But anyway, the film becomes a big hit. It becomes a real big hit, and then that makes Rick Rick gets like a third career going into the 80s as a straight to video action star. And so he's going to Italy and he's going to the Philippines and he's doing all these. He's doing all the action film genres of the 80s, but the straight to video ones. So he's in Terminator ripoffs, he's in Rambo ripoffs, he's in Mad Max ripoffs, and he's like starring in a whole plethora of those. But also he's like the fireman now. So he makes a deal with Cannon Pictures and does about 6 movies for Cannon, including two fireman sequels.
I love this.
And but now because he's a legitimate action star again. So when he does guest shots on television, he's getting the top rate.
Right.
So when he does an Airwolf, it's a big deal. Right. When he does a Chips, it's a big deal. Yeah.
So you said his career ends in 88. Are you going to tell us why?
Well, he retires.
Oh, he retires.
Yeah, he's made enough money now. He retires.
I was scared you were going to say he died. Well, so look, the thing of the book is there's a dark tone here. Mm-hmm. And you got into it a little in your script because the other note in your script that you said was that Brandy comes out of the carnage just covered in blood. Yeah. This dog covered in blood. But there's only one killer to focus on in this book. Mm-hmm. It's not Charles Manson. Yeah. It's Cliff.
Yeah.
The monologue that I read that I really sat up on was when Rick, during Bounty Law, was asking Cliff about killing because Cliff had been in World War II and he had killed before. Mm-hmm. And Cliff gives him some advice on if you really want to know what it's like to kill somebody.
Yeah, well, actually what he's asking, because he's playing the killer in Jigsaw Jane.
Right, in Jigsaw Jane,
Jigsaw Jane kills everybody with a stiletto. So he's like, I'll do it.
Cliff gives him some advice. Page 52.
Okay. Rick remembers drinking booze and discussing his Jigsaw Jane character with his stunt double at the bar located inside the smokehouse off of Riverside Drive. As they talked and drank, Rick asked Cliff, had he ever killed an enemy soldier with a knife? Plenty, answered Cliff. Plenty, Rick repeated, surprised. How many is plenty? What? Cliff asked. You want me to sit here and count? Well, yeah. Well, let's see, Cliff thought. He started counting silently to himself on his fingers until he ran out of fingers and had to take another lap around the track. Then he stopped and said, 16. If Rick's whiskey sour had been in his mouth at the time, he would have come close to doing a comedic spit take. You've killed 16 fucking guys with a knife? He asked incredulously. Yeah. Rick got real quiet, leaning forward, and asked his buddy, how'd you do it? You mean how could I do it, mentally and emotionally? Cliff asked. Or how did I do it, physically and practically? Wow, good question, Rick thought. Well, I guess the first. How did you do it? Well, not every time, but most of the time was me coming up behind some joker and taking them by surprise. Rock gets in some guy's shoe. He straggles behind his company to take off the shoe, get rid of the rock. I come up behind him, stick a knife in his ribs, hold my hand over his mouth, and twist the knife till I feel him give up the ghost. Fuck, Rick thought. But, Cliff said, holding up his index finger, now I for sure killed him. But did he die because of me? Or did he die because he got a rock in his shoe? Cliff philosophized. So let me get this straight, Rick clarified. You stick a blade, then you cup a hand over his mouth, squashing the screen, and then hold him through the whole damn death rattle till he dies in your arms? Cliff took a swig from his highball glass filled with room temperature wild turkey and said, yep. Wow, Rick exclaimed as he knocked back some of his cold whiskey sour. Cliff Booth smiled to himself as he watched his boss wrestle with this idea and then asked provocatively, want to know what it feels like? Rick's eyes moved up to Cliff's face. What do you mean? Cliff repeated low, slow, and deliberate. I said, would you like to know what it feels like? Then adding with a shoulder shrug, for your character. Rick didn't say anything for a while. The bar seemed to get real quiet. Then Rick Dalton let escape a very soft, yeah. Cliff smiled at his friend and employer, took a big gulp of booze, laid the heavy glass down hard on the bar, and said with another shoulder shrug, kill a pig. What? Rick said. Kill a pig. Cliff repeated sinisterly. After a beat of silence where the words kill a pig hung in the air, Cliff continued to explain. Buy yourself some big fat hog. Take her home to your backyard, then get on your knees next to her. Hold her. Feel her. Feel her life. Smell her. Hear her grunt and snort. Then with the other arm, stick a butcher knife right into her side and hold on, brother. Rick on his bar stool listened to Cliff mesmerized. Now, she's going to scream like a son of a bitch and bleed like a bastard, and she's going to fight you. But you keep holding with one hand while you keep sticking that blade inside of her with the other. And even though it'll seem like an eternity, somewhere in the first minute, you'll feel her die in your arms. And that will be the moment you truly feel death. Life is a bleeding, screaming, violently jerking pig in your arms. And death is you holding a bunch of heavy, unmoving meat.
It's crazy. It's brilliant. I love that monologue. Was that something that only came into your mind for the book? Or was it something that was maybe...
A prop guy told me that.
A prop guy? Really? Is that true?
Yeah, a prop guy used to be a Navy SEAL told me that.
During the shooting of the movie?
No, not during the shooting. Long years ago. Yeah.
Great. I absolutely love it. I love it. Well, and Cliff is the killer. You know, in your misadventure chapter, it starts off with, the minute Cliff shot his wife with a shark gun, he knew it was a bad idea. and so, you know, we talked about this in the Backstory Magazine article, but just going, because you elaborate here, you tease us, but then you don't fill in the blanks. You say that basically Cliff has a second thought. He tries to save her. So you could still leave it a little nebulous of accident, not accident. But he says that there was a 7-hour conversation. Mm-hmm. And, quote, had a great conversation that they never could have had in life, mm-hmm. quote, end quote. Yeah. And did you ever think of filling us in on that conversation? Or was it just this private moment?
I think you get what you need from that. But it's about them just kind of going over their whole life. How do we go so far afield?
Sure.
You know, from everything. But now it's at death's door and all blame is let go.
Sure.
And now it's just they're reminding themselves who they were.
I love that chapter, but everybody loves Brandy the dog.
Yeah.
And so the chapter for Brandy, entitled Chapter 4, Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, you know, the joke is, first and foremost, Cliff gives her bones from Musso and Frank's from lunch, and you don't set that scene at Musso and Frank's in the book.
Right,
so you're showing your reader consistently, and to your credit, that you're subverting the genre yet again by subverting your own movie and not doing a simple retelling of it.
Well, again, it's a situation where, like, when I first wrote that scene, it took place in Marvin's office.
At William Morris.
Yeah, William Morris's, Marvin's office at William Morris. And but now I'm doing the movie version. Well, it's much more exciting to be in Musso and Frank's,
sure.
a place that still exists where you can have extras mulling around in the background and you have nice architecture rather than just being in an agent's office. But in the book, it makes more sense to be in the office.
Ooh, hey, this seems like the perfect place to jump in really quick and remind you about Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. And, you know, if you've never read us before, you could test drive us and you could read our free issue. And once you've read our free issue, you could become a subscriber if you like it. And just in case you do want to become a subscriber, I'm going to give you a discount coupon code of SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory Magazine. And I hope the first thing that you do once you get your 1-year subscription is you go read our Once Upon a Time in Hollywood issue, because we have so many great Tarantino things in it. And I do want you to know, I meticulously planned that there is almost no crossover between the huge 2 articles in there that we did about Tarantino's process and today's podcast. So it will be new material for you, I promise. You know, there's so much to explore over at backstory.net. I hope you check us out, and thanks for considering subscribing. Of course, I would also like to thank our sponsors, Final Draft. Final Draft 12 is out now. It's the premier software in the world. And Quentin Tarantino is actually in the Final Draft Hall of Fame. He was inducted at their awards ceremony, and he made a great speech. If you've never seen it, please go look it up, Google it. And in the speech, he talks about the Walter Hill script that we talk about in this episode. And it's just a fantastic speech. So I hope you look that up. But you should also be looking up what's in Final Draft 12. And I'm going to tell you right now, new features include track changes, an outline editor that helps convert your outline into screenplay form. So you have a script to start with. It's not going to write your script for you, but it's going to give you that structure, translating it from your outline. There's also a focus mode now, so you could kind of turn off the internet and the world so you could hyper focus on your writing, which is basically, I think, meant for me. You know, Final Draft also made enhancements to the beat board, which is my favorite part of it because it's like an electronic corkboard. You could put Post-it notes on it. You could put index cards on it, and you could write tons more than would ever fit on one of those little things. Expand it, make it small. You could tag digital photos, video, music, whatever you want. And it's just always carried around with you in your laptop. Beatboard is pretty incredible. I love Beatboard. So that was enhanced, as was the production mode of Final Draft. And look, here's the deal. If you want to get Final Draft, you could use code QAPOD21 to save 30% off a purchase of Final Draft over at finaldraft.com. That's QAPod21 over at finaldraft.com will save you 30% off of your purchase of Final Draft 12. And that is one heck of a deal. So thanks again to Final Draft for their support. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our interview with writer-director Quentin Tarantino regarding his novelization for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I love this chapter. Buster Cooley, another stunt guy, owes Cliff $3,200, can't pay him. Cliff gave it to him out of the kindness of his hearts. He comes back and says, I have an idea of how we could get our money back, and we could do it together. And basically the concept is to dogfight with Brandy.
Yeah. He's got a killer dog, and this dog is for sure to make him money, and I'll go in halves with you.
And it makes sense later for the movie when, Brandy goes versus the Mansonites. But here it's just this fascinating trip in which you see Cliff falling in love with Brandy. And she's fighting. She's doing great. They've made $14,000 each, so his debt is paid back.
Yeah.
And they're talking about retiring her soon. And
don't reveal the end of the chapter.
I'm not going to reveal the end of the chapter because I knew you wouldn't want to talk about it. I just love this idea of Buster Cooley and when did it come from? Because that's another absolutely standout moment in the book.
That's a true story I heard.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. It's great. I mean, not the end of the story.
No,
clearly.
well, not the end, but everything before the end.
Okay.
Everything before the end is a true story I heard.
Later on, there's a mobster story that I absolutely love in chapter 17. And
that's a true story, too.
And that's a true story, too.
Yeah, and again, not the very, very end, but the setup for it all.
Okay, the setup for it all, because I absolutely love it. That was the Medal of Valor chapter.
Yeah.
And it was just another fantastic moment. But, you circled back to something about Bruce Lee, in the book, and you showed that Cliff was also a ringer.
Yeah.
And a ringer, as you define it, is somebody that is a day player that the stuntman and or other crew wants, and is somebody that could go up against the director and just purposely get fired and then be given a $700 tip by the crew.
Well, it's the idea is like, okay.
I love it.
Yeah, if you got some asshole director who's abusing the crew, there's not much a crew member can do without getting fired and possibly get a bad mark on him. And then if there's an actor who keeps tagging, which tagging is when you actually hit a guy for real
by accident.
Yeah, or sometimes they just don't give a shit.
Sure.
If you got an actor or something who's abusing your guys, there's nothing a whole lot you can do, but you can hire a stunt player for the day. And that guy's a ringer, and he's gonna fuck up that actor, or he's gonna fuck up that director. And
you show these examples of Cliff doing that, which are absolutely
like knocking Otto Preminger in the mud in Hurry Sundown,
which is absolutely hilarious. But then he's on the set of Green Hornet, and he's not there as a ringer.
Yeah.
And he knows that Bruce Lee had occasionally tagged some stunt people.
Yeah.
And he was just in a bad mood, and it just gives that extra justification that we could never have known in the movie of why this is just business as usual for Cliff, which is absolutely fascinating. There's a subversion though, and people expect you to do this recreation possibly of the home invasion. And I'm just going to give a spoiler and say that you don't. But what I love about it is that somebody's seen your movie, they've liked it.
Yeah.
They plop down their $10 on this book. They're not getting a transcription of the movie. They're getting further insight. And although you set up earlier, as the reading that you did of how this night happened, it helped Rick's career, you start going off the rails in an absolutely organic fashion in your third act of your book, in which essentially you're getting us more into the conversations of the workers on the sets, their stories, what satisfies them, and even going to the to the bar that they go
the Drinkers Hall of Fame?
Yeah, the Drinkers Hall of Fame, the bar in the Valley. And there we meet Kurt, who's your actual stepfather.
Yeah, he was the piano player at the place. He was the piano bar guy,
And in the book, he's getting you an autograph from Rick Dalton.
Right, yeah.
Because you as a child loved 14 Fists of McCluskey, which doesn't exist in real life.
But in real life, it would be Leonard Nimoy. He got me the autograph.
That's cool. That's really cool, actually. But so tell us just when you had that idea in which you realized, I'm not going to transcribe my movie. You've all seen my movie. Anybody that's buying this book has probably seen the movie.
Yeah, well,
and you're giving us this extra insight into the inner life.
Yeah, well, again, it's like, one's a book and one's a movie. And so the big action climax of the movie, well, that was a movie. And that was terrific for the movie. But I don't think it needs to be necessarily recreated in in the book, and it wasn't even about that time. I wanted to kind of keep it to the 2 days,
right?
Those 2 days in February, but then also like something like I ended up writing the Drinkers Hall of Fame section, literally just for my own edification during the writing of the screenplay. But I never even typed it up. I mean, because there's no way in the third act I'm going to go to have they finish the Lancer episode and have James Stacey and Rick go to a bar and talk and shoot the breeze for 40 minutes. That's not the third act of a movie.
When I interviewed you for the magazine, you got this box out that had all these handwritten notes, and you were showing me all these scenes that you did as like your research. You would have like different notepads.
Yeah, no, I literally, it's like, that was how I ended up doing research or finding out more things about Rick's career, is I would just like have the characters talk to each other, just write another scene with Marvin. Marvin asks him about this. Marvin asks him about that. And then you just like, I would just get more specific about the information. But again, none of it meant to be part of the narrative.
The craziest thing in the book, since you skipped that ending, but you did a definition of Manson himself through Cliff's eyes as a manipulator of women.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant because even Cliff is impressed by his game when you get into the story of Deborah Jo, aka Pussycat in the book. And you know, she left her family, and even her father tried to join the cult, like because Manson was giving her father women, you know, and like just Cliff was blown away. You wrote this monologue. You wrote this monologue that I was like, I almost stood up as I was reading it because it was so incredible. It was just so crazy. And it kind of comes to Cliff's understanding of Manson and manipulation and quote unquote how much work it is. Right? And so it's when Cliff goes to Paris for a while.
Oh, you're talking about the mock speech?
The mock. You know, it's a pimp, a mock, as you say in the book, but also in 70s terms of exploitation cinema, the Mac.
Yeah, well, that's how the Americans pronounce it.
I know. So I mean, like, so the Mac Daddy, you know, that's coming from all this. So this definition by the pimp of, you know, Cliff says, "What's the secret?"
You read it.
Really?
Yeah.
You want me to read this one? Of course you do. All right, what's the secret? Cliff asked. Simple, said the Mac. Fuck 'em good, fuck 'em real good, and fuck 'em real good real often. Cliff smiled, but the French fellow assured him, hey, that's harder than it sounds. You can't fuck 'em like you fuck your girlfriend. You can't fuck 'em like you fuck your best friend's girlfriend. You can't fuck 'em like you fuck your father's mistress. That's fucking for fun. This is work. For work, they fuck customers for money. For work, you fuck them for money. And trust me, they're harder to please. If you want to keep them in line, you better fuck them good, and you better fuck them a lot, which means you're going to have to fuck them when you don't want to fuck them. But even when you don't want to fuck them, you have to fuck them, and you have to fuck them good. And the more bitches you have, the more fucking you're going to do. More bitches means more fucking. No sleeping on the job. You get lazy even 4 goddamn days, that bitch is going to wake the fuck up. The spell will be broken. And when the spell is broken, it's not like, okay, I guess that was that. See you later. When the spell is broken, that bitch fucking hates you. And that bitch doesn't just hate you. That bitch wants to see you dead. And maybe she tries to kill you. And maybe she tries to steal your shit. And maybe she calls her father. Maybe she calls her brother. Maybe she calls the boyfriend she had when she was a little girl and asks him to save her. And now it's him coming after you with a knife, or her brother coming after you with a pistol, or her father coming at you with a fucking shotgun. Or she takes the pussy you taught her how to use to recruit some joker to kill your ass. In other words, a Mac ain't got no days off. There ain't no free fuck holiday for a true Mac. You fuck her, and you keep fucking her, and you can never stop fucking her. And you can never stop fucking her good. You can't be bored. You can't resent it. Nobody gives a shit if you're in the mood. You're her man, and you take her there every time. And the key? Different. I mean, it keeps going. It keeps going. Like I had it into there, but the definition is Cliff just decides it's too much work.
Yeah, he's like, fuck that.
Tell me where this monologue that you smartly made me read rather than in your voice. Tell me where this monologue came from, because it's so funny. It also is the plot line of, like, you know, 30 different 70s movies.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know where that came from. That's my favorite part in the whole book. All right, when I started writing, I'm like, holy shit, this is one of my best monologues ever. And even though it's a white French pimp, it's meant to be read like Sam Jackson.
That's amazing. I love it, and it's such a throwaway.
No, it was my favorite. It was my like, holy shit, where the hell did this come from?
And you're getting into the inner life as well of Cliff, so that he could recognize game knows game at the end.
Well, then later when it comes about the Manson, then it's like, oh, it makes sense. It loops back around,
right? Because he knows he's the Mac Daddy.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised, but not entirely surprised once I was into the book. There wasn't a Francesca love story there, and I was curious, because Cliff is kind of hesitantly thinking that it's not going to last between them.
Yeah.
Where do you see it going? Because there's no mention of them falling in love even. She's pretty much not mentioned in the book. Do they last? Is Francesca the girl?
Well, from having written 92% of the films of Rick Dalton, yes, their marriage actually does
That's
last.
awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
She's contrary to all popular opinion at the time, she's with him the whole way.
Hooray for Francesca.
Not only that, in the 70s, Rick actually starts doing, he does all the talk shows. He does Dinah, he does Merv Griffin, he does Mike Douglas and everything. He starts doing all the game shows. So he's on Match Game, he's on Celebrity Password, he's on all that. But one of the shows that he's on, he goes on with Francesca, is he does Tattletales.
Okay.
And she's a hit on Tattletales with her little ditchy Italian shtick and everything. Everyone loves her.
Francesca Carucci. Who would have known? So here's the thing, though, that's really interesting. There's an actor, Aldo Ray, and you have a bit of a chapter, and it's really the only part that we see of one of, Rick's films in Spain.
Yeah.
Because that was another place you could have gone in the book, is take us on those sets, but you don't.
Yeah.
You take us to Aldo Ray, and it goes back to what you're doing throughout the book so well, in which you're having this story of the dangers of alcoholism for actors. In the book, you also define Rick as being undiagnosed bipolar, treating the disease with alcohol, as many people did before they were able to get other medication, which is really fascinating. But I mean, there's a strong history there. There's Billy Wilder's Lost Weekend, John Huston's Under the Volcano, all the way to Leaving Las Vegas. You mentioned Pete Duell committing suicide, right? Which is fascinating.
And you mentioned about how the industry understood most of these men. They came out of World War II. They came out of the Korean War. So there was an understanding,
right?
All right, of people that had to drink to put the demons down.
Well, and you cite Lee Marvin on the set of Spike's Gang, and he got drunk for a violent scene because the young actor, people thought maybe reminded him of somebody that he needed to kill.
Of a soldier he killed.
And you said George C. Scott had a contract that 3 days of shooting might go off the rails to alcoholism.
Absolutely.
Tell us about the subplot, because it's in the movie for sure. Rick gets very angry at himself, and he's worried about blowing his lines. But in the book, I mean, Rick wakes up in puke in the book, in his own puke, and you do a very good job of getting into that dark demon that needs to be tamed. And I'm just curious how that element was accentuated.
Well, it was just it's part of the thing in the movie, and then happens in the course of that day, is Rick has to actually come to grips to some degree with his alcoholism, and then the death of Pete Duell went a long way. Now that doesn't mean that he just solves it easy enough, but even at the end of the Lancer day, he's drinking his whiskey sours in the bar with James Stacey, but he's keeping count of them to some degree,
right?
He
knows he has to learn lines.
Yeah, exactly. He knows he has to learn lines, and not going to let that little punk, all right, whip his ass, So he's he's keeping it. He's keeping it somewhat together. He even has the idea when he's at home. Okay, I either go to bed now or I'm going to make another pitcher of margaritas, and I don't want to do that.
and so, it's a scene with Cliff, which is Brad Pitt. And Aldo Rain is the character in Inglourious Bastards. Was that a tribute to Ray Aldo?
Of course it was. Yeah.
Aldo Ray. It didn't hit me until I'm reading that on the page.
Oh, yeah. No, it's totally. Yeah. And Aldo Ray kind of specialized in playing like tough sergeants.
in one of your flash forwards, you mentioned that Trudy's nominated for her turn in John Sayles' script, Lady in Red, which she was nominated for Best Leading Actress in the Quentin Tarantino's 99 remake of John Sayles' script, Lady in Red. Yeah. Is that a project that ever attracted you? Is there any truth to that? Have you ever considered doing something like that?
It exists in the universe where Sharon Tate is also alive and stars in Tess. All right. So, so it's a universe that didn't happen. But but that would be during that time that I wasn't making movies, but between Jackie Brown and Kill Bill. So that is one I could see, because that's a really terrific script, and the movie's really good.
Sure.
But like that could have been done with like the budget of Ragtime or something, and that could have been really terrific.
Have you ever considered taking a movie that you like and doing a remake like that, or taking an unpublished script and doing that?
Of course, I've
unproduced?
considered. I haven't dedicated 2 years of my life to do it.
Sure.
All right, so this was kind of, but I could imagine doing that with the Lady in Red. I probably won't, but I could imagine it. And so in my little reimagined world, during those like 6 years I didn't work, maybe I did that, and I cast Trudy.
And I like to see the flash forwards of Trudy getting nominated multiple times.
Yeah, me too.
Being in these different roles, which was great.
Yeah.
The only flash forward that's missing, if you want to talk about it, because you left it out of the movie for sure, but you hint at it, is Jim Stacy. You have Jim Stacy on a motorcycle, and he was hit by a drunk driver and lost his left arm and leg. And then, the end of his life was pretty shitty because he...
Yeah, but that's past 1999.
Interesting.
Novelist and narrator doesn't know about that, but he knows about the accident. He knows that he lost his arm and his leg on the I think the left side.
Right. He went to prison in the 2000s for 6 years for molesting an 11-year-old.
Yeah. So the novelist and narrator doesn't know that.
Novelist narrator does not know about that. Okay. Okay. I get it. Fred Raskin, excellent editor.
Yeah.
We interviewed him for Backstory. I love the guy. Here's the interesting question: when you're writing this book, what was your interaction like with the editor at HarperCollins Perennial? So how does somebody edit Quentin on the page when I could see one version that they just say, oh, Tarantino wants to do this? Yeah, just send us the pages when we're done and we're going to hit print. Or was there more of a refined interaction where they would occasionally ask you questions, challenge?
There was definitely a more refined situation. It was more like the editor's name is Noah Eaker. When I chose the publisher, I chose the editor. That was the most important thing. I go, look, it's not going to be about the advance or anything. I ended up getting a good advance, but it wasn't going to be about the advance. That wasn't going to change. That wasn't going to make me choose one place versus another. It can show their enthusiasm, and that would be great. But it was going to be the editor. And I met a couple of really good ones, but there was something about Noah that, before... we had like a 2-hour conversation. About the last hour, we were finishing each other's sentences. But the thing about him is like, look, I want to work with you to make the best book possible. I want this to be the best novel I can possibly make. And look, I'm very confident with my screenplays, but when it comes to writing a novel, this is my first time doing it. And frankly, I don't know what I don't know. So I need you to help me out. And I need you to point out things, that can be better. I don't want to make any stupid mistakes.
And how was the relationship? What surprised you the most about it? What was a note maybe that you got that steered you in a different direction or just made you re-examine your work a little on the page?
A lot of it just kind of boiled down to maybe a restructure of a sentence or you don't need all that. You don't need all that. Just, you keep throwing emotions around. They said this, they said that tentatively, they said that hesitantly, they said that with whatever the bullshit thing would be. Because we don't need all that. You don't need that. But the biggest thing was there was like about 5 chapters after the Spawn Ranch where there wasn't Cliff in it except for him being a fifth wheel at the James Stacy thing, and he's like, I think I don't want you to have to write a whole new chapter, but we're really missing Cliff here. And I go, well, I have another chapter that I didn't include that would be a jump forward, and that would be the Aldo Ray chapter. And he goes, well, I could. I didn't want to mess up the timeline because we're just kind of dealing with that day. But maybe if I stick it where I ended up sticking it, that would still work. So when we got back, we would know where we were. And he goes, well, that's great because that's when I started missing Cliff. And so that was his suggestion. I just happened to have one stray Cliff chapter sitting in the bottom of the drawer.
That's perfect. Endings are important, and the Trudy relationship with Rick was a great way to bring it home.
Yeah.
Basically, when I went to read the screenplay, that scene was in your screenplay.
Yeah.
And that was something that was the most shocking thing to me that didn't make it in the film. By the way, I love the film, you know this.
Yeah.
But it was so good to see it in the book. And as I'm reading the book, I'm like, come on, he's got to drop the phone call from Trudy at night. Where is it going to go? And so you first and foremost did this extended scene with Trudy and Rick playing a what if.
Yeah.
The actor's game What If.
Yeah.
And she goes into this diatribe about how they're going to get married one day, and she's the boss, this little 12-year-old girl, but she says that she'll let Rick act like the boss in front of his friends.
Right, yeah.
But at the end of the day, she's the boss.
Yeah, she's the dom and he's the sub.
Right. And Rick says, oh, yeah, like, because they have this great argument about it. He says, this is making me uncomfortable. And she's like, well, child marriage was a real thing in the Wild West. He's like, I don't want to be talking about this. And then she brings it to this power dynamic, and she's like, well, I'm the real boss. And then Rick says, oh, yeah, and what happens if I don't listen to you? Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, I will have to punish you. And then Sam Wanamaker calls action.
Yeah, right.
and it's just the greatest end to a chapter. But so there's so much of that. But and we are going to the how you're closing out the book. Mm-hmm. You have this great phone call in which we've seen Rick insecure. We've seen him starting to realize drinking is not his best way forward. He needs to commit more to his art. Mm-hmm. And she calls him and wants to run lines with him at night. Mm-hmm. And it's just this beautiful scene where it's two actors, which is basically the third act of your book. Yeah. It's people focusing on their craft, people complaining about their craft, but trying to find themselves in it. And she basically coaxes Rick to do it by telling him if they do it on the phone and they get better at their scene, they're just going to knock everybody's socks off the next day. Yeah, And by the end of that call, it's like what you said in one of your earlier flash forwards, in which Rick's always cheering for her every time she's nominated, and it's like this lifelong friendship. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the construction of that scene. Why it was removed from the movie, because it would slow down the momentum of getting to the action of the home invasion. Yeah. But then the inclusion of it as basically the topper to end your book with. That and McQueen referencing the pool scene. But this scene between Trudy and Rick, it was a perfect way to bring things full circle.
Well, I've talked to a few different male actors that worked with Jodie Foster when she was younger, and they were all said that it was just an amazing experience. That the actress that she became later as an adult was absolutely right there as a kid. And so I talked to David Carradine talking about what it was like when Jodie Foster was guesting on Kung Fu. I've talked to Harvey Keitel about what a 13-year-old Jodie Foster was like.
On Taxi Driver, obviously.
And there was like one of those things where it was like her mother came up at some point and go, now Harvey, Jodie is an actress, and da-da-da. And then Jodie is like, Mom, he knows. You don't treat me like a kid. He gets it. But I really especially remember David Carradine talking about working with like Jodie Foster on Kung Fu, and just with this blazing intelligence that she had. When I wrote the script, that was my favorite scene in the script. I mean,
it's amazing.
It was there was no world where that would not make the movie. But it was one of those things where there was two problems with it in cutting the movie together. One, it's the end. It kind of ends the movie. So now then you have this epilogue that follows. So the fact that it was an end was not such a good thing for the movie. But even more important than that was in putting the movie together, when it came to that, those 2 days version of the story before you go to the third one, I started thinking of the scene when the Manson people come to the house as not an epilogue, but the third act.
Sure.
So that means that those 2 days in February are the first and second act. And once we put together an assembly that we had worked on for a while, it was obvious that after the Spawn Ranch, I got to get out of February and got to get on to the third act. That tops it. There's no topping that. And so then after the Spawn Ranch sequence, then it was just simply wrapping up that night. And so you have to wrap up that night before McQueen comes. You have to wrap up the night before he gets the phone call from Trudy. Much to the chagrin of all the actors in the movie. But once you realize that your topper is Spawn Ranch, then you got to get out of February as quickly as possible. And so that ended up becoming the thing. And like you could do a version of the movie where there is no Manson family, and it could end with the phone call. And actually, some people might even prefer that ending. But that made it a perfect ending for the book. But one of the things I also really like about it is, you haven't brought it up, is the weird non sequitur chapters that are just the Lancer.
I was going to bring it up. I knew we were short on time, but yes, the Lancer.
Yeah, there's chapters in the book that are just like at least 3 chapters that are dedicated to just the Lancer story. And I talked to one of the editors I met with along the way. I go, what did you think of the Lancer stories? And she goes, Well, arguably, they're the best written chapters in the book because it doesn't sound like me. I'm trying to write like Elmore Leonard or Louis L'Amour. But the byproduct of all that for the final climax, as opposed to just having an interesting touchy-feely scene between Rick and Trudy, you've been following the Lancer story without really trying, and so you actually get the climax of the Lancer story wrapped into this final chapter. So it actually has dramatic weight.
It has a lot of dramatic weight, and you get so deep into all the character motivations for everybody on the show, and the concept of will he kill his dad? Will he not kill his dad? What's the right thing to do? Is fascinating. You brought up Spawn Ranch, which you excised from the book, essentially. So you took the tension away there. But
I kept Spawn Ranch.
Yes, but a completely different version.
Yeah, well, the version in the movie's too good, all right? I'm not going to go head-to-head with that. I would spend 20 pages just trying to write what you get in a shot.
I love what you did. It was cute. It was totally unexpected and fascinating. But look, I absolutely love this book. Congrats to you on this.
Oh, thanks, Jeff.
I am obsessed with Cliff Booth, screenwriter now, and that's the other book you need to write about his screenwriting career, because I want to interview Cliff Booth one day. But look, man, I can't wait to see what you do next, and thanks for being so generous with your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's always fun to talk to you, man.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to writer-director Quentin Tarantino for being so absolutely generous with his time and coming down and chatting about his novelization for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's out now. I hope you get it. And I really think you'll love it, because it was so much fun to read. And it was, of course, as you just heard, really fun to talk about as well. I would, of course, like to thank our sponsor, Final Draft, congratulating them on their new release of Final Draft 12, their latest screenwriting software. If you've been on the fence about buying it, discount coupon code QAPOD21 will save you 30% off of Final Draft 12. So now is the best time to buy it. There's a lot of cool new features in there. I've talked before about Beatbox. If you look up Final Draft Beatbox on YouTube, you could see a video of what I'm talking about. I really love that feature. But there's a lot of great features in Final Draft 12. So go explore it at finaldraft.com. See what's there, see what's right for you. And if you like it, use discount code QAPOD21 to save 30%. Of course, while you're surfing around online, I hope you'll also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net or via our iPad app, Backstory. You know, if you've never read us before, you could, of course, test drive us and read our free issue. And if you like the free issue, we hope you'll become a subscriber. And if you do want to become a subscriber, why not use coupon code SAVE5? That's SAVE and the number 5, and it will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory Magazine. It'll give you access to our old issues as well. They're not all up there, but a lot of them are, and we're trying to add more old issues into it. And I hope the first thing you do with your subscription is go grab the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood issue that we did with Quentin Tarantino. There's so much great stuff in there, and I purposely made sure not to overlap and put any of it in the podcast, because anyhow, talking about this novelization is a totally new deal anyhow. But there's a lot of great stuff in that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood issue, which has over 10,000 words of great entertainment journalism focusing on that film through interviews. So I highly recommend that issue. And look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my iTunes and Spotify podcast listeners and my YouTube watchers of these Zoomcasts on the Backstory Magazine YouTube page support my passion project. So thanks for considering. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2021. All rights reserved. And folks, if you ever want to get a hold of me on social media, you could find me as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter, or I'm also running the Backstory_mag account on Twitter. I'm doing the same thing on Instagram, actually, Yo Goldsmith on Instagram, or Backstory_mag on Instagram. I have a Facebook fan page. I'm not on it as often. I promise to interact a little more on it. You could always email me at backstoryletters@gmail.com. I promise to not respond immediately because it's just too bogged. But you know what? If you're reading the book, if you're reading Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I want you to write in and tell me what quirky, cool things that you're noticing in it or that you're digging. So yeah, do that for sure. But look, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.